and a heartfelt namaste. I, Anuradha Sharda, would like to thank all of you for watching my videos, for liking, for sharing, writing in your comments and your suggestions. People have repeatedly asked us how on how to analyze a kundali and to make videos on how one analyzes whether a particular house is good, whether one can derive happiness from a particular house or not. So let us work and find out in very simple terms on very few principles which are traditional and basic principles, right from Fal Dipika, which is the classic. In Fal Dipika, we have an entire chapter on analysis of a house. From that, I have taken up 3 points for now, and we'll go on discussing it in the series further on. So, as we move further, we talk about Bhav Chintan, or how to assess house. From Fal Dipika, we have taken up 3 points. So let us take up the first point. First and foremost, we see the placement of the house. What do you mean by that? When we take up a particular house, we want to understand how the planets are placed with respect to that house. Supposing we are talking about the fifth house. Okay, so we make that house the ascendant, and then we see if the sixth, eighth, and the 12th from that particular house are the malefics. If they're malefics in all the houses from that, then it destroys the house. These malefics destroy the house. So, and when we were talking about the fifth house, we see the 6, 8, and 12 from the fifth house and see if there are malefics there. These malefics will destroy the entire house. Second, we see the lord of the house or the bhavesh, and we see the placement of this bhavesh from the house. That is, when I continue on with my example, when we're talking about the fifth house, we see the placement of the fifth lord from the fifth house. So we take the fifth lord and we start counting from the fifth house. If the lord of the fifth house, that is the fifth lord, is placed in the first, second, fourth, fifth, seventh, ninth, and 10th from the fifth house, in such a case, this lord of the fifth house will be able to do good for its own house. So it, either if it's in the fifth house itself or it's in the sixth house, if it is, again, consequently count the numbers and see if it is arranged like that, then it is has the ability to do good for its own house. Finally, we come to significators. So when we're judging a house, we need to see the house, we need to see the lord of the house and the significators. What is the importance of significators? We have so many books, especially Uttar Kalamrit, which says that there are so many significations for every planet. So every house has a particular significator. For example, Jupiter is the significator of the fifth house. So when we're talking about Jupiter, that if it is well placed, if it is well aspected by, say, Venus, unafflicted Mars, Mercury, sorry, and a very strong moon, in that case, and or a strong moon, in that case, this Jupiter will give a very, very good expression for the fifth house. Even if the first two laws are not working, in that case, the children may not prosper too much, or may not be very, very intelligent, may not be very, very enterprising, but the person would definitely be able to derive happiness from his or her child, and the person would also be well looked after by the child. So the Jupiter will give very strong results for that person, the fifth lord. So these are the few things that we need to know. And Karak, as Jupiter is, or any other Karakatwas of planets are called, are very important, which we will explain in one of our next upcoming videos of Karako Bhagnashaya. How Karaks can also spoil their own houses. That is something we will take it up in a next video. Now let us go and check out some examples and see how these three rules work. But before that, a recap: we need to check out the house, we need to check out the placement of the lord of the house with respect to the house, and finally the karaka of that house. As we move ahead, we take up the significators. Is one thing that let us go revise once more. The first house significator is Sun. The second house significator is Jupiter. The third house is Mars. The fourth, Moon and Mercury. Fifth again is Jupiter, as I have been using in my example. Sixth is Mars and Saturn. Venus is your significator for the seventh house in case of male. In case of female, it is generally taken to be Jupiter. In case of the eighth house, it is Saturn, Jupiter and Sun in the ninth house, and Sun, Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn for the 10th house, 11th house, Jupiter and Saturn for the 12th house. If you want to study it all in detail, we have a course coming up on basic astrology. Enroll for it and you will be able to know how these play a role for every houses. Now when I take up the chart of Bill Gates, and I am talking about the fifth house, because fifth house represents big enterprises. So let us take the fifth house into consideration. First rule, let us see the 6, 8, 12 houses from the from this fifth house. In the sixth house is Moon sitting there, aspected by Mercury, exalted Mercury, and also by Mars. So this is a little bit of mixed results, but more because this Mercury is very strong, as it is the sixth. It is in its own house and it is also exalted. Now the eighth from it has Ketu, which is a problem, little bit of a problem, and the 12th from it is again exalted Mercury and Mars. Again, little bit of problem, but then because they are benefics, Moon and Mercury, and this Moon is strong because it is moving towards Purnima. So these gave him a big enterprise, but with a lot of controversies. Again, when we see his fifth house, in the fifth house is the fifth lord sitting there with an exalted planet. There is a debilitated planet, but it undergoes a cancellation because of presence of the lord of the house itself there and an exalted planet there. So we see, since the lord of the house is situated in one, that is, the second rule also is working for his chart. Now let us see the karaka of the fifth house. The karaka of the fifth house is Jupiter, and Jupiter is sitting in a friend's Rasi, that is in the sign of Leo, is unafflicted by any malefic effect and is quite happy there. So, and if you want to go above the basics and have a closer look, you will see that as far as nakshatras are concerned, Jupiter is sitting on the throne in the Magha Nakshatra. So gives him great enterprise. So we see how this is fitting in his chart. And because it's Saturn sitting there, so it gave him some delay in his work, also delay in his children, because fifth house also represents children. We can similarly take up the second house and we can see that the second lord, the second house does not, second house of wealth does not have any malefic in the 6th, 8th or 12th from it, and he has his second lord is posited in the 9th house from itself. Also, the karaka of second house again is Jupiter, which is not afflicted at all, as we had discussed earlier. So we see very well that his wealth aspect, though his corporation can be under the radar many a times, his wealth for certain is very well and truly his to conquer for a long time. Again, Jupiter in Magha Nakshatra. Then let us take the chart of this lady here. We are talking about married life here. So when we were talking about married life, for ladies, we take up Jupiter. Jupiter for her is sitting in its own house in Pisces. Let us start with the first rule of Bhava analysis. When we are talking about Jupiter, Jupiter is the seventh house, 6, 8, and 12. From this house of seventh house, eighth house has a debilitated Lord sitting there, Mars. So apart from that, the other houses which cause problems, 6 and 12, are free from any malefic effect. So there can be some problems in marriage due to husband traveling or some fights, squabbles that can be seen, or marital relations, that is husband's family, can cause a little bit of problem. Now, when we're talking about the Lord of the house, the Lord of the house is Jupiter, which is placed in fourth from itself. So it's in a good position as per our second rule. And finally, we take up the Karaka. The Karaka here is Jupiter, and Jupiter here is aspected by Saturn and is also aspected by Sun. So though it is very strong, it is very strong in its own house, and it has a Cheshta Bal, but being aspected by Saturn and Sun, there can be problems. And she did have initial separation from her husband because he was on a traveling job and he had to travel a lot during their marriage period. In all, because it shows an average to good married life, their marriage has been on consistent for the last 47 years. Finally, we take the chart of Amitabh Bachchan to see happiness or name and fame for him, because name and fame again comes from the fifth house. And let us see how it translates. We see the fifth house, we take the fifth house, we take the 6, 8, and the 12th from it. We see the sixth house from it is empty, the eighth house from it is again empty, and the 12th from it has the Lagna Lord Saturn retrograde, which is moving away from the house sitting there. Yes, certain blemishes could be found in his name and fame, but on general, his name and fame is ever rising, increasing. Again, we take the placement of the Lord from itself, from this house. So making the fifth house as an ascendant, we see that Mercury is placed in the fourth from it. So it very well works with the dictum of placement of the Lord in 1, 2, 4, 7, 5, 9, and 10th houses. And then we see that if the Karak of this house is well placed, yes, the Karak of this house is well placed. In fact, how is it? It is placed in exaltation, though in the sixth house. That means he had to work very hard to reach that position, and aspected by the Lagna Lord, also saying Saturn, also saying that Saturn, though is a malefic, is a Lagna Lord, so cannot be considered that malefic for this Lagna. And so it says that he is a self-made person who has got his name and fame on his own grit. So we see how to do analysis of a house to understand whether the house is capable of giving us good results. How will that results manifest? And when will that result manifest? Those results will manifest, good, bad, or ugly, during its dasha and antardasha of that planet. Also, we have to check out if the transit is good. The transit is the final decision maker or the final postmaster to deliver your goods to you. If you want to learn more, we have a basic course coming up at the end of June. And please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share our videos. Till we meet again.